I never imagined one small moment, one piece of paper tucked behind a drawer would unravel 32 years of certainty. Looking back now, I can see the signs long before that day in the bishop's office. They were subtle, quiet, woven into the background of my life in Provo, the way the mountains are always there, whether you notice them or not. But back then, I wasn't ready to see anything. I was too busy being who everyone needed me to be. My days followed a predictable rhythm. Wake before the sun rose, pack lunches, braid my daughter's hair, remind my son twice, sometimes 3 times to grab his homework. After dropping them off at school, I do a quick grocery run at Smith's or Costco, depending on my coupons. Then laundry, dishes, preparations for the young women activity, dinner plans. Checking the group chat for updates on who was bringing what on Sunday. Everything was measured, routine, expected. People say Utah is peaceful, but I think a lot of that peace comes from everyone pretending they're okay even when they're not. For years I played along. I smiled in hallways. I volunteered for callings. I brought casseroles to families in need. I taught lessons on being strong, obedient, faithful. I repeated messages I'd memorized since childhood. The Lord will bless you for your sacrifices. Just keep going. Stay on the covenant path. Words so familiar they almost felt like lullabies. Or maybe sedatives. I'm not sure which. But what I never said, not to friends, not to my husband, not even to myself, was that something inside me felt off. Not broken, exactly, but unsettled, like a room where the furniture was rearranged slightly and you couldn't figure out what had moved. It started subtly. A heaviness on Sunday mornings. A strange tightness in my chest during interviews with the leadership. A quiet longing for silence, real silence, the kind that didn't come with expectations. I told myself it was stress, or lack of sleep, or hormones, or anything that didn't force me to examine the part of me I kept pushing away. Then I accepted a new calling, young women's presidency. I told myself it was an honor. My husband told me it would be good for my testimony. The bishop said he'd felt prompted. And yet deep down a small voice whispered, "You're already stretched thin." But like always, I ignored it. I didn't know then that this calling would lead me to the letter. The first few weeks were the predictable whirlwind of new responsibilities, planning lessons, coordinating activities, learning the preferences of each class presidency, making sure modesty standards were gently woven into conversations without members complaining that they weren't woven firmly enough. I tried to be the steady adult presence the girls needed, the kind of woman people praised, dependable, faithful, appropriately cheerful. Every week, I met with the bishop to go over updates. His office smelled faintly of old furniture polish and the kind of cologne men use when they want to smell authoritative. Framed photos of temples lined the walls. A small, perfectly ironed BYU blanket sat folded on a chair. Everything was clean, structured, organized the way my entire life had been. One afternoon, after a midweek activity, he asked me to stay behind and help organize some materials in his office while he handled a phone call. I said yes without thinking. Saying yes had become automatic. The church building was quiet. The classrooms were dark, the hallway lights dimmed to save energy. Outside, the late winter air hung cold and still, the parking lot lined with patches of snow that would probably linger until March. The fluorescent lighting made everything feel slightly unreal. I remember the humming of the heater vents, the faint tapping of branches against the window. I remember feeling tired, the kind of tired that isn't about sleep. I moved a stack of binders to a lower drawer of his desk. It wouldn't close. I pushed it again. Something felt stuck. When I pulled harder, an envelope slipped out from behind the drawer's back panel and fell to the carpet. There was nothing written on the outside, just an old, yellowed envelope with slightly curled edges. I froze for a moment, staring at it, feeling a strange chill move through me. I told myself to put it back. I told myself it wasn't mine to open. But something deeper in instinct, a pull overrode everything else. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the paper inside. The handwriting belonged to someone young. A girl, maybe 15, 16. The first line hit me with a force I can still feel. I don't know how to say this out loud. So I'm writing it down and hoping someone will understand. I felt my breath catch. I sat down slowly in the bishop's padded chair as I kept reading. The girl described feeling unworthy no matter how hard she tried. She wrote about crying after church activities because she never felt good enough. She wrote about interviews that left her more ashamed than comforted. Shame about her body. Shame about her thoughts. Shame about things she didn't understand but felt responsible for. She had begged quietly for help, and no one had noticed. Paragraph after paragraph, her voice poured out a mixture of pleading and exhaustion. She felt invisible. She felt broken. She felt like the pressure to be perfect was suffocating her. By the time I reached the last line, my hands were shaking. If you read this, please don't ignore me. I read the letter again and again. Every word felt familiar. Too familiar, like echoes of my own adolescence. The modesty lessons that left me feeling embarrassed about a body I didn't choose. The long interviews about purity where I felt judged for things I didn't even understand. The weight of being told that my worthiness was tied to a set of impossible expectations. I hadn't thought about those memories in years, maybe decades. I had buried them so successfully I almost believed they were gone. But the letter brought them back like they'd been waiting. When the bishop walked back into the room, I quickly folded the letter and tucked it inside my bag. I acted natural, organized the materials, smiled politely, then left. The whole way home, I felt like the quiet tapping inside me, whatever it had been, was no longer quiet. It was loud, insistent, impossible to ignore. I waited until the kids were asleep before showing the letter to my husband, Ethan. He read it quickly, barely reacting. Then he handed it back with a shrug. "Why are you getting emotional about this?" he asked. "It's old. The bishop probably already handled it." "But what if he didn't?" I said. "What if she never got help?" "Look what she wrote." Ethan sighed. "Lauren, you're reading too much into this. Girls get dramatic. Teens feel unworthy sometimes. It's normal." Normal. That word stung more than he realized. "Don't you think someone should have listened to her?" I asked. "I'm sure they did," he said dismissively. "You're letting this get into your head. You need to trust the leaders. They're called by God. They do the best they can." His words dropped heavily between us, familiar in a way I wish they weren't. For years, when I expressed concerns about the pressure on our kids, about teachings that made me uneasy, about expectations that felt impossible, he reassured me with the same mantra. Just trust the process. But what if the process was part of the problem? I took the letter to bed and read it again under the dim glow of my nightstand lamp. Slowly, painfully, memories resurfaced, moments I had brushed aside, minimized, rewritten. I remembered being 14, staring at the ceiling of an interview room while a leader asked me if I had done anything inappropriate, even though I didn't understand the question. I remember being told to dress modestly because boys couldn't control themselves, leaving me feeling like a threat for simply existing. I remember being told that if I felt anxious or sad, it meant I needed to pray harder. I remembered crying in my room at night, silently so my parents wouldn't hear. I remembered writing in a journal pages filled with guilt and confusion and tearing them out because I didn't want anyone to read them. The girl in the letter wasn't just a stranger. She was a mirror. The next weeks felt like walking in two separate realities. The outward one, where I fulfilled my calling, baked cookies for activities, smiled at ward members. And the inward one, where every task triggered emotions I didn't know how to process. During a young women lesson about being examples of virtue, I noticed one of the girls sitting in the back. Eyes down, shoulders tense the way mine used to be. Something twisted inside me, a familiarity, a warning. At home, the tension with Ethan grew. He felt me pulling away emotionally, but he didn't know how to reach me without trying to fix me. His answers were always solutions, never understanding. One evening, while we folded laundry, he finally asked, "What's really going on with you?" I took a deep breath. "I'm not sure I believe everything I used to." The silence that followed was thick and terrifying. He put down a towel slowly. "Lauren, please don't go down this road." "I'm not trying to leave the church," I said. "I'm trying to understand myself." "That's how it starts," he whispered. People start questioning one thing and soon everything unravels. He said it like unraveling was the worst thing imaginable. But for me, unraveling felt like the only honest thing happening in my life. Over the following days, small things started bothering me more. Comments in Relief Society about divine roles for women. Lessons about obedience. Pressure on the youth to maintain standards that felt less like guidance and more like surveillance. I noticed the way girls apologized excessively. The way women minimized their emotions. The way discomfort was labeled as lack of faith. I saw so many cycles repeating. One afternoon, while talking with an older sister in the ward, I asked casually if she remembered any girl from years ago who had seemed withdrawn. She hesitated, then mentioned a name I vaguely recognized, a girl who stopped attending and moved away suddenly. Rumors had swirled back then, but no one ever said anything directly. It was easier to assume she had fallen away than to admit she might have been hurting. That realization cut deep. The girl in the letter hadn't just been ignored. She had been abandoned emotionally by a system built to keep everyone smiling. As the memories resurfaced, I realized how much I had silenced myself across the years. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I prayed instead of speaking up. Every time I disagreed with something, I convinced myself I was the problem. Every time I felt invisible, I blamed myself for not trying hard enough. The letter exposed the truth. I had learned to make myself small. The more I examined this, the more I realized how many women in the ward were carrying similar burdens. During quiet conversations, those whispered ones that happen when kids are distracted and no men are around, heard fragments of stories, anxiety pushed aside, miscarriages treated as trials of faith instead of trauma, marriages struggling under unspoken expectations, daughters overwhelmed by perfectionism. The pattern was everywhere. One morning, while driving the kids to school, my daughter asked me why girls' track shorts at the high school were being debated again at church. She was only nine, and already absorbing messages about bodies, modesty, and responsibility she shouldn't carry yet. That day broke something inside me. In the following week, I went back to the letter often. It became almost ritualistic. Sit in my bedroom, close the door, unfold the warm paper, let the girl's voice guide me through truths I hadn't faced. Her pain and my own became inseparable. I began journaling, something I hadn't done in years. I wrote about my teenage experiences, my shame, my confusion, my first interview with a bishop, my first time feeling like my worth was conditional. I wrote until my hand cramped. It felt like unclogging a pipe that had been blocked for decades. As I reflected, I noticed patterns in my life, subtle and repetitive. Whenever I ignored my discomfort, life brought it back in a different form. Whenever I stayed silent to keep the peace, the discomfort grew louder. Whenever I tried to be perfect, I lost more of myself. It was as if life kept offering me the same lessons until I finally acknowledged them. And the hidden letter was the loudest version yet. A few weeks later, I asked to meet with the bishop, not about the letter, but about my calling. He greeted me warmly, as he always did. He talked about the needs of the young women, the importance of strong female leaders. I listened politely before telling him I needed to be released. His eyebrows lifted in surprise. May I ask why? I chose my words carefully. Because I'm realizing I've ignored parts of myself for a long time. I need space to understand my own feelings before I guide others. He leaned back in his chair. Are you struggling with your testimony? Struggling wasn't the right word. Awakening felt closer, but awakening inside this context felt threatening. I'm reflecting, I said simply. He nodded slowly, but I could sense his discomfort. To him, reflection often meant spiritual danger. To me, it meant truth. When I left the church building that night, the sky was dark, the parking lot empty except for my car. I sat inside for a moment before turning the ignition, feeling a strange sense of calm, not certainty, not relief, but clarity, the kind that comes when you acknowledge something you've avoided for too long. At home, Ethan tried to be supportive, but he didn't understand. He worried about the kids, about appearances, about what people would think if I drifted. His fear made him defensive, and my honesty felt threatening to him. We argued softly, quietly, never yelling, but with tension thick enough to taste. "You're changing," he said one night. "I'm uncovering," I replied. "There's a difference." The following Sunday, I stayed home from church for the first time in my adult life. I told Ethan I needed a day to breathe. He took the kids and left quietly. I watched them drive away from the living room window, my heart pounding. The silence in the house felt enormous, but for once, it didn't feel scary. I spent the morning reading the letter again. Then I read my journal entries. Then I sat in complete stillness, letting memories surface without suppressing them. In that silence, something inside me loosened. I saw a clear pattern. Every time I suppressed a truth about my discomfort, my doubts, my needs, the consequences grew heavier. Every time I aligned my actions with what others wanted instead of what I felt, life mirrored that back to me in the form of emptiness, exhaustion, and emotional distance. The cycles were undeniable. It wasn't the church alone. It was me. I had given away parts of myself without even realizing it. But now I was choosing differently. That night, after the kids went to bed, I opened my bedroom drawer and placed the letter inside. I didn't hide it. I didn't destroy it. I honored it. Because it wasn't a scandal, it wasn't an accusation. It was a reminder, a symbolic turning point. Someone else's plea for help had become the catalyst for my own. Today, I'm not here to tell anyone to leave the church. I'm not here to say everything is wrong or everything is right. I'm simply telling the truth of my experience, a truth that sat behind a drawer for years until I was finally ready to see it. I haven't figured out everything. I still attend sometimes. I still love parts of the faith, but I'm no longer living on autopilot. I question when something feels off. I speak when something feels heavy. One choose honesty over perfection. One choose myself. And I've learned something important, something the letter helped me see. Life repeats lessons until you pay attention. Ignore the whispers, and they return as nudges. Ignore the nudges, and they return as disruptions. Ignore the disruptions, and one day, a hidden letter falls out of a drawer and lands at your feet, demanding to be read. Sometimes we find things not because we're looking for them, but because it's time. That letter didn't break my testimony. It didn't shatter my faith. It simply opened a door in a room I had kept locked for too long, a room filled with forgotten pieces of myself. And once I stepped inside, I realized those pieces had been waiting patiently, quietly, for me to come home.